Imagine a world where you could stop any murder before it happens, where you know exactly when and where it would be committed and have the ability to capture the killer before they kill. Sounds pretty good until you become the target of the chase. This is the plot of the 2002 film Minority Report. In this speech, I will dissect the film and explain some of the metaphors and deeper meanings conveyed in it, in order to deepen your understanding of the movie and possibly other movies as well. I have read interviews with the director, Steven Spielberg, and the writer, and also consulted the script of the movie before making this speech. This movie is a masterpiece, and not just an action movie starring Tom Cruise to show him shooting and punching and blowing stuff up. I mean, it does include that, but it's also so much more. In this speech, I'll be talking you through how the three acts are set up and laid out to see clearly, and talking about some of the cultural references made in this movie, and also discussing the small visual details used throughout this film, such as the themes of water and eyes. The film uses visual cues and symbolism to signal when each of the acts of the movie begins. Minority Report is a film set in the future where murders are being predicted by three psychics and stopped by a special police unit called Pre-Crime. The film follows the chief police of this unit, John Anderton, who wants to prevent these murders because he lost his son. John is convicted of murdering someone in the future by these psychics, and he frees one of the psychics to try and help him prove his innocence. He eventually did not murder the person he was supposed to, and it turned out he was set up by the leader of Pre-Crime, and eventually outed the flaws in Pre-Crime, proving the leader guilty of the murder of one of the psychics' mother. The first act, beginning with the start of the movie, sets the scene, showing a typical pre-murder case, showing Anderton's longing for his dead son, and showing how the psychics predict murders. This act ends when the ball drops, literally, for the murder Anderton is supposedly going to commit. When someone is going to be murdered, the pre-crime unit has a mechanism that etches the name of the murderer on a wooden ball. The second act begins with Anderton's name showing up on the ball, a visual display letting the audience know that something is going to begin, and marking Anderton for the target of the whole second part of the movie. Anderton spends the whole second act escaping, dodging the police officers he used to work with, and taking one of the psychics out of the stasis she is kept in order to prove his innocence. At the scene of the supposed murder, it turns out that the psychic could not predict John's innocence, but he himself could by refraining from killing the man he was supposed to. His alarm goes off, signaling the time of the murder originally given to him by the psychics, but, as the audience can see, he doesn't kill the man as he was predicted to. The alarm is an auditory signal to the audience, ending the second part of the movie, showing that something that was supposed to happen didn't, and not ending the way you thought it was going to play out, and leaving you curious as to how it will. In the third act, things are flipped entirely upside down. A character that acted like a villain in the first act, a detective, ends up on Anderton's side, attempting to prove his innocence, and is killed by a character who was thought to be a good guy, the leader of Pre-Crime who helped Anderton, and ended up being a killer who had gotten away with murder to keep the Pre-Crime program going. In the end, Anderton escapes and was proven innocent, and proved the leader guilty to the world. As you can see, in this movie, the three acts are laid out perfectly. Each has a beginning, a goal, and an end when that goal changes. As I stated before, not only are these acts clear and easy to follow, they also have symbolic cues to let the audience know when they start and end. Speaking of symbolism, there's lots of symbolism in this movie with the cultural references it makes, such as the Gettysburg Address and the book Tom Sawyer. In the beginning, when the pre-crime cops are working on an ordinary murder case, where a man is supposed to murder his wife after discovering she is having an affair, there's a kid in the house who is getting ready for school. He is reciting the Gettysburg Address with clear intent to memorize it.
7 years ago.
This may seem like a random extra event at first glance, but it also carries a lot of meaning. The Gettysburg Address, as is well known, is a speech by Abraham Lincoln regarding a battle of the Civil War. It also touches on slavery by mentioning a free nation and the sacrifices the Union soldiers made for a greater purpose. Hilton, the Marquette University Law School Faculty Blog, 2013. Although there is no outright slavery addressed in this movie, there is talk of the pre-crime system taking people's rights away, since the police are arresting people who did not commit any crime yet. There's even a deleted scene where Anderton discusses with his higher-ups that he hadn't actually read any criminals their Miranda rights since before pre-crime. Frank, Minority Report film, script, 2001. And taking away rights means taking away freedom, which is a topic discussed in the address. Also, three psychics who predict murder are in prison to be used for their abilities, kept in sort of a stasis. So you could say that this is similar to slavery. They are even freed at the end of the movie when Anderton reveals to the world the flaws in pre-crime. The topic of the Civil War comes up later in the movie too. John outs the leader of the pre-crime at a sort of gala celebration. The leader is presented a Civil War gun that is supposed to signify peace and the lack of the need to use it again. He then goes to attempt to shoot John with it, which is what the pre-crimes thought he would do, and ends up shooting himself instead. displaying to the world how his whole system is wrong. Another cultural reference that was made in this movie is the mention of the Mark Twain book Tom Sawyer. Anderton mentions it in Act 2 while he's hiding from the police at his ex-wife's house, and he's talking to her on the dock by her cottage. He says he used to read Tom Sawyer to his son before he got abducted, and how his son always got scared of the part where Tom and Becky were stuck in the cave, and kept saying, "Gotta figure this out." Well, the book Tom Sawyer is very thematically relevant. I didn't read the book, but I read a summary from shmup.com. The book is about some kids who see a murder, and the wrong person is framed for it. They look for treasure on an island, but get lost in a cave. People think that they drowned, but they didn't. Tom and Becky are almost out of the cave when they run into the real murderer hiding in there with them, and have to escape out a back way. Then the town finds out about the real murderer, and they discover that he died in the cave trying to get out. A bit dark, but this relates to the movie quite a bit. Since it is explained that the psychics had been used since they were children, they represent the kids who know the truth about the murderer, who is the leader of pre-crime. The drowning and the island are relevant themes because, as I will bring up later in this speech, water is a hugely important theme in this movie. The cave scene is relevant because, like the kids, Anderton is stuck. All of his teammates think he's guilty, even though he didn't kill anybody, and they're after him and the psychic he rescued, who are both staying in his ex-wife cottage, which is surrounded by water. The two of them were stuck in the cave, and like his kid had said, they needed to figure it out. The literature used in this movie isn't the only symbolism. There are themes used throughout this film, such as water and eyes. The topic of eyes and seeing is a prevalent theme throughout this film. The futuristic society it's set in uses retinal scanners to identify everybody, from using targeted advertisements at the mall, walking into work or a secure environment. The pre-crime police used it to identify their criminals they imprison after they've stopped the murder. In the middle of Act 2, Anderton is on the run and doesn't want anybody identifying him, so he goes to this sketchy place to get an eyeball replacement operation so that nobody detects him. He keeps his own eyes in a bag so he can use them to break into the secure pre-crime facility he has access to and free one of the psychics to help him. Later in Act 3, when he's in prison for supposedly murdering someone, his wife uses the eyeballs in a bag to break him out. There's even a scene at the beginning where Anderton is buying drugs. His dealer reveals that he knows who Anderton is, despite him having no eyes. There's also lots of references to eyes and quotes about eyes and images of eyes thrown around the movie. One of the writers of the screenplay, Scott Frank, says in an interview from Cinephilia.com, "The idea of reading a person's eyes to identify them, I thought, is the theme of the movie. In fact, at one point in the script, Anderton gets his eyes surgically removed from his head so that he can maneuver around without being tracked. It's about being seen and seeing what you want to see, and about being blind to certain things. This is a man who has a blind spot, and because of it, he has embraced the system for all the wrong reasons, and it takes the system coming after him to see what's really going on." I think that this theme exists in the movie because eyes are how we see things, and everyone sees things differently. In the last act, things get flipped upside down, and those who are bad are good, and those who are good turn out to be bad. Anderton getting his eyes changed is symbolic of his perspective change. Also, his perspective changes because he had always been the chief of police at pre-crime, and he always saw things from that perspective, taking the information from the psychics and arresting the would-be criminals. But after he gets his eyes changed, he rescues a psychic and then understands her point of view, being stuck, forced to see nothing but the future. He also gets arrested briefly for a crime he didn't commit, and sees things from that perspective. Identity, perspective, it could mean both. There's a lot of symbolism in the eye theme of this movie, and it can be interpreted many ways. Along with eyes, water is an enormous theme in this movie. The whole movie has a washed-out tone to it, as though it is being viewed underwater. The psychics are suspended in water while kept in semi-consciousness in order to help their abilities. Anderton submerges himself in a tub of ice water to hide from the police who were tracking his heat signature. The rain occurs at a lot of points in the movies. It is revealed that his son, Sean, was abducted at a public swimming pool. And in the end, when the psychics are freed, they are moved to a cabin on an island. Now I'm going to take you for a ride through what I believe all these scenes mean. For the rain, there's one part in the beginning where Anderton is taking drugs and longingly watching videos of his ex-wife. It's raining outside.
Sweetie,
In the video, she says to put down the camera and watch the rain with her. The video ends. I believe that in some ways the rain and the water represent the future. He was looking at the video in the past when he and his wife were looking at their own future, but Anderton in the present refuses to look out the window and acknowledge his own future. Then, at the end, when he and his wife get back together, they're finally watching the rain together, facing a future together, revealing that they're going to have another kid. Water, like the future, is something that is very hard to control. When Anderton loses his kid, he's swimming in the water. When he surfaces, he sees that Sean is gone. Submerged in the water, he is helpless, unable to control what was going to happen to him. Later, he chooses to submerge himself in an attempt to escape the cops, but he can't move, he can't breathe, he can only wait for his future to come upon him. and he's not the only one who experiences the helplessness of being submerged in water. The psychics had spent most of their lives suspended in water, unable to control the future they were forced to be constantly seeing, surrounded by land, the surface. In the end, they live on an island, free to breathe but surrounded by water, this time able to choose when they see the future. Water is unpredictable and dangerous, calm and cool, and when it is still, you can see a reflection in it. Water in this movie, I believe, represents a force that you cannot control, but it is not always a bad thing. Your own future. As you can see, this film has deep running themes. I haven't even broken the surface about talking all the metaphors used. This movie has all around the makings of an interesting film, with 3 clear acts, each with their own beginning and end, to defining themes with references to well-known texts, to having consistent metaphors used throughout the film to be interpreted in many ways. Now, I hope you at least feel inclined to see this movie if you haven't yet, and if you have, I hope you've been given a new point of view to rewatch it with. Thank you for watching.